Welcome everybody. So glad we could all be here tonight virtually for the Inspired Work Cafe Society's virtual public reading series. I think this is the first time we've done a public reading series just via the internet, so this is going to be really fun. Before we get started, just got a little bit of housekeeping to take care of, and then we'll get on to the main event, focusing on, of course, Voicing Suicide, which was edited by Daniel Scott, who we'll be hearing from in just a bit. If you want, feel free to say in the chat where you're coming from, where you are right now, or what the weather's like. As here in Kelowna, it's been very snowy all day, but a really nice snow, so we're not complaining too much. My name is Shimshon Obedia. My pronouns are they, them, and I just want to take this moment before we begin here to acknowledge that this, where we are broadcasting this from in the Okanagan, is on the unceded and traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan people, and more importantly, that we are uninvited guests on this land. Before we get on with the rest of the night, I want to let everyone know what we're planning to do, but feel free as we go on throughout to engage throughout the chat function. If you want to give snaps after a particular line you really like, or quote a line you really like, you're more than welcome to do that in the chat there. I know that it really can help to feel a lot more connected than we normally get to be here in virtual land. So we really, really encourage that. So we'll be going through, starting with an introduction to tonight's reading by Nancy Holmes, who is a local poet here in the Okanagan and also a professor at the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus. Then we'll get into having Daniel Scott, who edited this anthology, Voicing Suicide, who's going to be talking about a little bit of what we can expect throughout the evening. We'll hear some readings. We'll have a little break for an open mic, get some more readings in there before the end. And of course, then we'll end off the way we always end our public reading series here at IWC with a little bit of an interview and some questions. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention before we go on with the rest of the evening tonight is that, as the title implies, we are going to be hitting on some rather heavy subject matter, specifically around self-harm and suicide. Now, please, if you need, feel free to reach out to some of the resources. If there's anyone who in your life has been affected by any of the issues that got brought up today, I just want you to know that there are plenty of those resources. You can find more about those at crisiscenter.bc.ca if you're here in BC. There's also a national suicide and crisis hotline. I'm going to post a document in the chat here, and we'll post that at the end as well. That has local resources, but there are also resources for those who are not coming to us from within Canada. Just a quick Google search and you'll be able to find those as well. So we'll post that again at the end for those who don't get it. But for now, if you look at the chat, you should be seeing a document upload there. Apologies, it's just loading. All right, well, you should see it there, and you're welcome to download that if you'd like. All right, well, I think I've rambled on long enough. I'm going to pass this off to Nancy Holmes, who will be introducing the evening and Daniel Scott.
Well, welcome everybody on behalf of the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies. We're thrilled, as usual, to support the Inspired Word Cafe. And it's really wonderful as well to be here to meet Daniel Scott, who has for many years run one of the great reading series of the country in Victoria. So it's really nice to have that kind of synergy and connection between all of us. It's also really wonderful to see people without masks on. I don't seem to see that very often. So that's the one nice thing about Zoom. So it's delightful to see all of you readers. There's been so much about mental health in the news recently, especially around kids and school. I've been listening to the news a lot. And so this is so timely and so important. I know that I taught online last term here at UBC, and there was, some students are coping just fine, but there were lots of students who were really, finding it very, very difficult. Lots of anxiety, lots of stress. So it's such a timely topic for us to be focusing on tonight. I certainly, in my own life, one of my adult children has attempted suicide more than once, and so it's a very important topic for me personally. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the poems tonight and what you're writing about. So welcome everybody here from Kelowna and elsewhere, especially all the readers from other places. I'm just going to do a really quick introduction of Daniel, who'll talk about this book in more detail. As I mentioned, Daniel Scott is the former artistic director of Planet Earth Poetry Reading in Victoria. He ran it for about, I think, 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years. He's written in many different forms, including academic work, but poetry is one of his great loves. He's written and published a few books with ecstatic editions, Gnarled Love, Terrains, and Random Access, as well as works, Black Onion, and a couple of chapbooks with Goldfinch Press. He's published poems in anthologies and chapbooks, and as I say, numerous academic publications as well. He also won a one-act playwriting competition a couple of decades ago. He's an associate professor emeritus at the University of Victoria, the School of Child and Youth Care, and he's a father and a grandfather. Welcome, Daniel. So good to see you here today in Kelowna.
Thanks very much, Nancy, and it's nice to actually put a face to your name, since we've had email exchanges for some time now. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Algonquin-speaking people, Esquimalt, Saanich, and Songhees peoples. Also on unceded territory. Victoria is very complicated because of the Douglas treaties, and it's too much to explain to go into that. I want to say a bit about the book. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is what it looks like. The cover designed by my partner, Christine. I'd like to say a special word of thanks to the publisher, Richard Olofsson. It's not easy to get work about suicide into the public domain. And it's interesting that since the book came out in late in the fall, I've been trying to get, on the radio and that sort of thing. It's very difficult. People are afraid to bring it out into the open. And part of the impetus for the book came out of some of my academic work, working with a group of scholars who are doing they call themselves critical suicidology, really trying to re-examine some of the assumptions about suicide and the study of suicide. And I connected with a scholar in Australia who has written the afterword in this book, named Katrina Jaworski. And between the someone needs to mute there. between the two of us, I would write a poem about suicide, and then she would riff on it academically. And eventually we came to the place where we put out a call for poems and have poems that come in about suicide from literally from all over the world: New Zealand, Singapore, England, Holland, across
So
North
the
America.
mute is mute or on mute? No, this is not good.
Okay, now I'm unmuted myself again, Simpson. So I think it's really important that we understand that it's important for people to speak about suicide and the experiences they have around it, both those people who've attempted suicide, but also those people who've experienced loss of someone through suicide. And both are represented in the book. I came across just the other day, pursuing some reading around one of my favorite authors, Boris Pasternak, a Russian novelist and poet of some considerable ability, who author of Dr. Zhivago, for those of you who don't know his work. He says this: art has two constant, two unending preoccupations. It is always meditating on death, and it is always thereby creating life. And I think that's a really important underlining for this book, that those of us who have thought about and written about suicide are really working at creating life and allowing space for life to happen, including a life that has some hard edges to it. One of the things that has surprised me as the editor was the beauty of the poems that came in. Not something I expected particularly. I'm grateful for all the poets who submitted, for their honesty, for their courage in submitting their work, and for their eagerness to give voice to their experiences of suicide. And you'll hear some of that tonight. And I guess we'll turn it over now to the first of our readers. Just need to clarify, are you going to introduce the readers, or am I going to introduce the readers?
I'm so sorry. I should have said that. I was planning on it, but if you want,
Yeah, no, you go ahead, Simpson.
So sorry. Oh, and I thought of everything. That was a wonderful introduction to this really, really impactful, but also, as you said, beautiful anthology. So thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you, Nancy, for introducing Daniel. Up first, reading, we have Pen Kemp, who will be up here in a moment on your screen. Oh.
Ta-da. Unmuted. Shall I go ahead? These two poems for my stepdaughter, Heather, who killed herself at the age of 20 and is still very, very missed. This, if you're following along in this great anthology, it's on page 150. Snarl. The moon is tangled in the bog. She is lost and drowning, hair caught, net tangled. Is it the moon or the face of a girl lost from over the marsh and far away? Shorn, she moves through the elements more surely now. Metaphors rise into being. I can still hear her last cry, the one unuttered, the growl and grimace of a dying animal, the persistent life of a breath past, away. In what might have been just a passing phase, if only she'd kept on, going, gone. Only a girl now, only a girl forever, only a child who now never, ever will be grown. she who would not hurt a fly. Suicide, a stepdaughter, collided with the law of levity and lost out on a limb, or in limbo, love, forlorn, tangled. When she dies, she scries, describing in vast arcs how to float above a body left behind. Her route bypasses Bardot's trap of fast rebirth as she soon learns to fly over the river's Styx, where we all cross at our peril and do not return. We can no longer discern the circles she traces, the knots she undoes. In the realm of time, we have only habit to fall back on, the familiar wet clothes that suit us to a thread, worn and weary with mourning. Hair pulled out by the root, if only if faith less, faithful. We don't know which she has chosen, nor why. But words over the abyss, one by one, a phrase or sentence lead us out of the bog, lead us home. And on the way, perched on the word, we bend to pick blueberries, sprigs of Labrador tea, scarlet, cranberry, bog fruit, found and offered freely to whatever guides are willing to hold her flame. Grief is no time for emotion. The sky opens and opens unto more sky. Later and lighter, she rises. Nothing can bog her down now. She is ageless, genderless, free from teenage girl angst, while we age more with each moment, caught in cultural specifics that label us she, he, confined to particularities of person and of loss. Thank you.
Wow, Pen, thank you so much. That was incredible. Thank you. We're just going to go to our next reader here. We have reading next Sally Kwan, who I'm going to unmute now, and we're going to switch over. And just a reminder, I noticed a few folks have just joined us recently, so if you're wondering about how the rest of the evening is going, we are actually going to get a chance to speak with the poets who are reading. I've had a few private messages right here showing up as we've been going. So just to answer those questions, yes, we will be chatting with folks after the readings tonight. All right, up next we have Sally Kwan.
Hi. Wow, that was a really, really beautiful and very moving opening for this. My poem is quite a bit shorter, and there's only one, not two. Suicide, I mean, it's something that everybody thinks about, I think, at some point. And yet, when I told people that I had submitted a poem to this anthology, they immediately got uncomfortable and silent, which is of course exactly what we don't want. We want to be able to start the conversation. So although it's not an easy thing to think about, I am happy to share this with you tonight. My poem is called Just Thinking. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just close my eyes and sleep the pain away? Sometimes I lie in the dark. Sometimes I toss and I turn. Sometimes I cry. Every so often, I take a pill. And every so often, I think about taking more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. That was really very, very wonderful. And thank you for everything you put in there. It's I think you're very right when you say often you bring up the topic of suicide, even in the context of an anthology, and all of a sudden the room does get very quiet very fast. And I think this is a wonderful way of being able to, as you said, open up the conversation. While continuing on this conversation here, up next, also reading from Voicing Suicide, we have Linda Crossfield. And Linda will be up momentarily.
Thank you. Thank you very much for putting this together. I'm reading from the unceded traditional lands of the Sinixt and the Kootenay Lake Band. I'm in Castlegar, BC. Yes, this is such an important topic because, as Sally just said, I think everybody's occasionally thought of it or whatever. When I wrote this poem, sometimes when you write poems, you don't quite know what they're about until afterwards. And this is one of those poems for me. I wrote it, and then sometime later, I was up wandering around Nelson's beautiful cemetery. We have a wonderful cemetery in Nelson, which is just a really nice place to walk around. And I go up there not infrequently to see family and friends and so on. And I happened to see the grave of a friend of mine who had committed suicide. And then I sort of knew what the poem was about. It's called What You Are Now. Every year the roses, sweep of petals, crimson, white, salmon pink, someone scattered that day by your grave. Friends, kin, wrapped in new and shocking grief, stood pale against the still green slope, began to comprehend what you are now, surrounded by western larch, lodgepole pine, that contain your spirit more than life or earth ever could. You are roots of trees, the aromatic bark, sturdy boughs. You are the rose, memento mori, the haunting, unforgiving, perfect thorn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was just so, so beautiful. I think when Daniel introduced this collection, I mentioned it's beautiful. It's not a word you normally associate with suicide. And I think there is no better word to describe kind of this collection and the way that you have to end up, because I think in one form or another, suicide has affected so many of us. And as I think you're putting it there, and really, really powerfully in that poem, the best way sometimes of processing that is through noticing the beauty. So thank you so much. I really personally appreciate it. Sorry, the digital applause was a little lag there. We're going to take a little bit of an open mic break here. We have a few open mic poets who are going to be reading here. Like at all our IWC events, we put in some spots that anyone can sign up for. And one of the great advantages of being virtual in these events is that what we have for our open mic ends up being a lot bigger of a selection. So we have someone joining us, I believe, all the way from Ontario, and we've already had people from all around BC, so it's wonderful getting to have more and more folks join us at Inspired Word Cafe. So up first, we have Valerie Brousseau, who will be reading for a couple of minutes here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. May I just check in with you for time, because whether I'm reading one or two will affect my decision of which one I'm going to choose to read.
Yeah, we've just got 3 to 5 minutes. So whatever fits in 3 to 5 minutes, probably usually one poem, but totally up to you.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see how it goes. I'll start with the first one. I do think that it's an incredibly important topic, and it's something that affects my life and my work, and it's something that I write about a lot. Much of my poetry centers around mental health, so it's something that I write about a lot, and it's really great to see everybody joined here tonight for a topic that's so important. So the poem I'm going to read first is called 10 to 15% of persons. I am doing 110 in a 60. I turn the dial on my car stereo all the way to the right. I can feel the bass pumping through my chest. I sing along. I try to make 120. This is what I do when I am manic, when my chemistry reaches for the sky and I forget I ever knew the lows. When my neurons fire as fast as I am driving and I forget I ever knew the lows. But this time, my voice sounds like a tin can echo. The bass feels more like a weight as I try to breathe deep. The car feels empty, as do I. When the depression hits, it's hard not to crave the mania, but I remember the little pink pill in the box marked Wednesday that I took this morning. I remember the depths I am stuck in. I remember the chemical tethers pulling down on my highs. The DSM says completed suicide is a significant risk occurring in 10 to 15% of persons with bipolar II disorder. It's a significant risk. It's the empty in the car, the weight on my chest, the low buzz at the base of my skull, the goodbye note in the back of my throat. It's the pain that keeps me from sleeping, the pain that keeps me smiling, when the mania is nowhere to be found, when the lows are what I am left with and I want to be 10 to 15% of persons. When I am manic, the street signs are a challenge. Now they tell me I will either get a ticket or die trying, and I wonder if it matters. I slow to 70. I find the driveway and pull in. I stop singing. I turn the dial all the way to the left. The weight is still on my chest. The headache persists. I think of the pink pill, the box marked Thursday, and how there's a pill in that one too, and how easily it would be to forget it. Thank you.
And you still have 2 minutes if you did want to read a brief other poem, but you don't have to if you don't feel like it'll fit in the time, but yeah, totally up to you.
Okay, I think I could probably make one more fit, and I feel like it's quite apt because it's called Poetry Show, so I'll go with that one real quick. A dark corner at the back of a bar. There are beers, there are strangers. There's a poet on stage. He jokes, "Welcome to the show of mentally ill poets." I laugh. My depression laughs. Everyone in the place laughs. I had put on lipstick tonight, wore one of my mother's tops. I am here, and the endless pull of my bed is now less like being in the orbit of a very large planet and more like feeling the pull of its gravity lessen as you drift slightly away. The thing is, you are still in its shadow. but I am here, and I wore lipstick, and I am laughing. There is someone sitting on either side of me, a girl with long golden hair and an easy smile, a boy who holds my heart with both hands, carefully. They watch. They are laughing too. The boy holds my hand. Sometimes he lets go and his hand finds its way to the small of my back. He looks back at my laugh and he smiles. The girl laughs with all her teeth and watches the stage eagerly. They watch. The poet talks of pain, of loneliness and anxiety. She reaches for my hand and squeezes. He squeezes too. Now the poet talks of suicide and they each squeeze tighter. Their eyes do not leave the stage. All three of us know how close I've come to not being here tonight, because putting on lipstick is a lot of work, because it's so easy to want to stay in bed, because it's so easy to want to be dead, because I've wished myself dead before and almost succeeded. They squeeze tighter and watch the stage. I stare ahead and tears clear a wet path through my makeup. I am not sad. Tonight I am full. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for sharing and joining us all the way from Ontario. It is real pleasure having you with us
Thank
here.
you.
And thank you for sharing those beautiful poems. Up next here, we have another open mic poet. Raul, are you? It looks like our next open mic poet was having some connection issues. Sorry, folks, just a moment. It looks like one of our open mic folks was not able to connect here. So we're just gonna move to our next open mic poet. Just a reminder also, we've been seeing some wonderful kind words in the chat. Poets, if you don't have your chat window open, you're more than welcome to see that while people are reading. There's been some really beautiful and supportive messages there. So it has been lovely to see the reactions as well as the emoji reactions we've been seeing. So please feel free to continue to put those in there. All right. Well, our next open mic slot, we have someone who has been to IWC quite a few times, quite a number of times, we should say, Travis Andrews. And Travis, if you could unmute your mic, I'll spotlight your video.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, my name is Travis Andrews. I'm a local poet based in Kelowna, British Columbia. Sorry, I'm looking at a screen over here, but the camera's over here. I've been writing poetry for about 8 years. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. It's a topic that affects a lot of people, so I very much appreciate being able to be a part of this. And for this particular open mic, I brought 2 pieces, and I wanted to try to get 2 very different emotions out during these. One of which is a fictional story that I wrote based upon a writing prompt. And the second one is a piece I wrote in the middle of the night a year or 2 ago when I had gone traveling on what I thought would be a world-changing, life-changing, I'd find myself adventure, and I was finding that it was not turning out to be that. So I'm going to begin with the fictional piece. It was based on a writing prompt where I'll just go for it. Okay. The thunder that ripped with a growl fierce and deep roared in and scored her as she shocked snapped from sleep, stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind reeling, head humming, chest thrumming, soul reverberating and pealing. She sat and she stared, the window glinted and glared, buried face in her hands, mental state slowly repaired. When then there it came, the first instance of the refrain. Stay inside, don't look at the sky, repeated twice midnight and day. Droning on in this din and deluge, a distant and blaring box slowly revealed this new reality of barricades and doors and locks. Black out your windows, please. Prepare to block all of your entrances. Lessen your grip on electricity's fragile, frail dependence. The voice flittered and hissed as static chewed upon its sentences. Eyes blinking, brow furrowed as silence regained its ancient hold, suddenly aware of the cold, shivering as a bell tolled, as outside the light snapped out, decided best to do as told. The food and water boxed blankly and gathered up, walking woodenly, staggering consciousness run amok. Bolts tightened, bed frame to door frame, sheets untucked, her fragile barricade put to test with her luck. Strange sights, sounds, and scents assaulted her that night, howling blades of helicopters and flashing strobe lights. Retreated deep inside, her mind shivering with fright until with booming reverberations came the end to her plight. Open up, came the voice from the door. We're here to get you, that's what we're here for. The indecision that had gripped her heart before became a rising wave, as in two she was tore. Lights winked at her, showed and stole her silhouette. There stood the door, behind either hope or regret. Unless perplexed, confused, failing of a test, was this the end of the chaos or the roaring of the crest? So that's one. The writing prompt was the concept of hearing an announcement from the government at night saying, "Don't look at the sky." Okay, so on to number two. I've given the history of this. So it's 2 a.m. and I've written 3 pages of starting lines. I want to get these thoughts out of my mind, so God damn it, I am trying. What I want to say is I felt alone. Back home, I had friends who I loved and who loved me from my foot to my crown. But I never felt like I truly fit in, sitting with friends sinning, a pint of beer swirling, sipping, but never felt truly belonged, not exactly at peace, but never overtly wronged. Sing songs and beer pong till dawn with my wrongs. But do I felt like I ran? I fled the country, created a plan, left where I thought no one knew could ever look at me askance. But you arrive, and I mean you survive, but not the resurrected, revived, new life wrought from fire you'd surmised. So you try to fit in, cloaked in a fake smile and personality, sit with the group of new people, and suffice to see it's not enough. You don't fit in and you're not accepted, but neither overtly thrown out or rejected as you suspected. I don't know. Fuck this rhyme. It is 2 a.m. in a foreign country. And you try, but what is it? Are you boring? So you staple the smile wider, but it still doesn't work and you're stuck trying to identify the divider. Is it you? Is it just who you are? You've come so far, but never felt up to par. So you drive on and on, grind on and try hard, but what will it take? And what personality flaw must be shaped? What on earth is wrong with you that you don't fit in with these fucking fakes? As you label them in your frustration, shunned. Okay, so look, I took a look at my life and I wasn't happy. I felt out of place and I wanted to vanish without a trace, so I did. And now it's 2 a.m. and I am asking, where are you? Where are those who want to scream truths from the roofs and feel no one feels the same, who refrain from playing games, who feel an eternal internal sense of shame, who smile from the corner over the top of their drink and think too much, who wear armor with notches and chinks, and as they pass through life, it rattles and clinks. It is 2 a.m., it's 2 a.m., and I have run away. Never comfortable, never fit in. My closest friends are handwritten, smitten with cold lyrics, hand and forebrain frost bitten. But I know that you're out there, and I know that you hear me. The ones avoiding crowding and the ones steering free. So where are you? The ones that I connect with are the ones who reject this. The lonely souls whose charcoal rolls ignite their tender souls, and it is 2 a.m. And while this truth may bend me, pirouetting around some youth-stained sending, scrounging for meaning, tongue loose and sprained from venting, I guess one day I'll glean whose book has the same ending, but not at 2 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you, Valerie, both for being here for our open mic slots. We really appreciate and really appreciate both of you sharing such wonderful and powerful words with us. Travis, I think you can probably see in the chat that what I was about to say is that 2 a.m. poem just really strikes home. I think we can all very much feel the emotion of all those wonderful words. And Valerie, I just that poem about watching a poet talking about suicide and how close that has come to one's own life and feeling that connection. I just that really resonated for me as well. Those were just both so such wonderful words you both shared. And yeah, it is. It can be a lot just to put on some lipstick. I did today, and just getting on Zoom even, and it is. It can be a lot. So thank you for sharing that. Up next, we're going to go back to some of our readers from Voicing Suicide, the anthology we're here listening for. We have, I think, I'm just looking here, we just had Heidi join us virtually. So Heidi Barnett will be reading up next. Heidi, if you could unmute your mic and start your video, we will spotlight you for everyone here. Heidi, are you able to unmute your mic? Heidi, can you hear us? Sorry, folks, we're just going to try that again. There we are. And Heidi, are you able to unmute your mic? Thank you so much for joining us, Heidi.
Thank you. I must apologize for being late. I had a family emergency come up, but I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Great.
So my poem was written in response to an event that happened at a school that I was at. A grade 7 student who committed suicide. She was very popular and very attractive, had lots of friends, so it was really a mystery as to why she did this. She staged the event by placing a lot of black items in her room, dressing in black, wearing white face as well, black lipstick. And she had invited friends to come over. And her friends, unfortunately, came later than expected. And so she died as a result of this act, which was really tragic. And it left a lot of questions in people's minds. And so because of the questions, I've tried to include a mystical element in my poem as well. It's called Consolatio. I write this now, and once again feel the body's weight, how it draws hours into itself as it drops. Too late, a crow in a willow caws. Too late to catch her before the cord snaps into place. I don't want to die, she whispers, but I have eaten the sun. It tasted like fire, and the sky is now darkening. She touches her mouth like a beggar pleads for bread and says, let me lay my head on the shoulder of your breath, Lord. Let me rest a while. The dog shakes himself awake. Too late to sound the alarm, to cut her down, breathe her awake. In ghost face, in a long black dress, Nintendo cord wound round her neck, she dances the end of life, staged as a game. It's April, and the cherry trees already in bud. At night when the wind blows, it's a child's voice her mother hears, a girl with green eyes waving from an upstairs window. She waves back, her hand a bird that dares to fly the dark.
Thank you, Heidi. That was beautiful.
Thank you for letting me read.
Well, we're very happy to have you here, and yeah, that was really, I think, really, yeah. Sorry, little speechless. That's just pulled me up short a little. Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, that same week that this beautiful girl died, the students at our school found a body of a young man on Mount Boucherie. He had leapt to his death thinking that he could fly. He had been using drugs, I think. So it was a real shock to our school. We had a lot of trauma to deal with that year.
Well, I appreciate you sharing this this processing. It I think means a lot to a lot of folks listening tonight. Up next, we have one last reader before we get into our discussion for the evening. We have Josie, and Josie, I apologize. I don't think I'm going to be able to pronounce your last name correctly. But Josie, if you're there, we'd like to spotlight you, put the spotlight on you for the last reading for the night before we get into our brief discussion here. Josie, are you there? All right, it looks like we haven't been able to connect with Josie. No worries. We're just going to move on to the discussion part of the evening. We just had a note coming through here. We've had a question sent through our virtual chat box here. Someone's asking if the poems will be made available. They are actually available. So these poems are actually from Voicing Suicide, which is a poetry anthology that was just released. For those who have joined late, it's from Accesses Editions, and actually the link is in the chat, but we can post it again. But that works as a bit of a perfect segue, because the person I want to bring up next here is Daniel Scott, who actually edited the anthology that we have all been hearing from. If you could please give a warm virtual IWC welcome to Daniel Scott.
You did post the ecstasiseditions.com as one place. You can order them through local bookstores as well. They'll know who the publishers are. I could read one more poem if you want, Shimshan, or we can just have.
We would love to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be really nice. Thank you, Daniel.
I'm sorry Josie didn't make it. She was coming from Ontario and she may have had some technical difficulties. I'm going to read a poem that's called Self-Murder. At one of the suicide conferences that I was at in the UK, B. Scherer, who is a trans person, was giving the universities welcome and began their remarks by saying, "I am a suicide waiting to happen," and then spoke for about 25 minutes. I don't think I was able to close my mouth once the whole time B spoke. And I then wrote this poem in response to what B said. And B has now used this poem in an academic paper as well. And the epigraph to the poem is a quote from B. I was murdered many times. I do not ask for sympathy. I ask for respect and action. B, by the way, calls suicide self-murder. That's just to help you understand the poem. I am, that one said, a suicide waiting to happen. I have been murdered many times already, wounded with many blows, torn, assaulted, raped, and claim the right to make, that one said, the murder complete with my own hands in my own time. There are those who desire to stop me, take from me my own hands, add wounds to wounds, murder myself again and again to keep me from dying. I only know, that one said, I do not want more taken from me or added on, not pity, not shame, not control of my death. I have been murdered enough already and will complete the murder of myself when I choose. Be shy.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for adding that. I think that is a really wonderful and powerful way of adding the last reading of the night before we dive into our brief discussion here. And I think it encapsulates so much of what this anthology has done, at least for me, and I hope folks who haven't got a chance to read it yet are getting a sense of what that and I think power really is that powerful feeling is through the readings we've had tonight. As we have had, I think, echoed a few times now, one of the themes throughout this anthology is not just addressing and talking about suicide, which in and of itself I think is so very important, and as we've seen here clearly really does have such a value to folks, but also offering a bit of a catharsis in a way. There's an uplifting element you've managed to capture here in the way you've ordered these poems and in what you've selected, Daniel. And I was wondering if you could briefly tell us a little bit about that process of how you managed to put these together in a way that can feel so cathartic, especially for those of us who have had suicide touch our lives in more ways and more times than we would like. And to visit this, I'll be honest, for myself, was originally a little difficult. I was afraid, I think like most people, that it would bring up some rather unpleasant memories that I've tried a lot to put behind me. And instead of feeling brought back to those places, I felt really opened, and well, it was like a cathartic release from this. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you managed to arrange these poems in such a way that I didn't feel like any of that was diminished, that impact was diminished, and we still had that uplifting beat to go on.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's a really a nice accolade for the book and for the work that we've put into it. Well, I had a huge number of poems come in, and as I said at the beginning, literally from all over the world. And I couldn't believe how the word of the book spread. And as I read through the poems, and many of the poems I've maybe read 10, 12 times, just thinking them through, I realized there was an immense pile of grief poems, people who were writing about someone they loved that they lost. There were 2 poems by people that were sent by family members that were they wrote them before they committed suicide, and both of those authors are in the book. They have committed suicide. and then the family members that sent poems about those people. There are a number of poems, people struggling with poems like the one that Sally read tonight, struggling along the edges of suicide, approaching it, trying it out. And so I thought, how can I arrange this? And the conclusion I came to is that I had to create a lot of small sections in the book, which were, each section was a bit of an arc, so that it would start with the kind of approach to suicide or a reflection on suicide, and then include poems of grief and loss, so that you had a kind of a surrounding experience in each of the sections. Like Penn, who read 2 poems, they're not side by side in the book, they're separated by quite a piece, because each of them has something different to say about that event. There are a couple of people, their poems are back to back. So there's all kinds of things going on in the book. And then I do want to mention the very academic and brilliant afterword that's in the book by Katrina Jaworski, who was the person who started me down this path of writing poems about suicide and using them in another, rather than just, oh, I've written a poem about suicide, I'll put it aside. I know that, that some of the poets, at least one poet who's here tonight, and I've exchanged email, and she's told me how many other poems about suicide she's discovered in her pile of unused poems. Poets write a lot about suicide, and one of the weird things about poets is that of all of the writers and artists, they have the highest rate of suicide themselves. So there's something very close in poetry about suicide that I think in the research that I did around the book, reading people like Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath, was very helpful in understanding that, and which is why I read that quote from Pasternak, that we engage this work of death and dying and the terrors along that edge in order to kind of find some kind of life for ourselves and for others through the poems. Is that enough of an explanation?
That and more. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking us through that journey. And like I said, for anyone who's gotten a chance to read the full anthology, it's, yeah, that arrangement, I think. And I really appreciate that you've done things like separating out poets' poems so that we don't just have kind of a rundown in alphabetical order, so to speak, or something like that. I really felt like there was such intentionality behind the way that they flowed. And as I mentioned, I found it very personally valuable. So thank you so much, Daniel. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time to chat tonight. However, I want to remind folks that Daniel Scott is actually going to be on the Inspired Word Cafe podcast, where he and I will be talking a lot more in depth about this anthology. So if you're curious about hearing a little more about this anthology, hearing Daniel speak more to this, feel free to check out the Inspired Word Cafe podcast. It's just Inspired Word Cafe, and you can search that on your favorite podcast app. It'll come up, or you can find it on our website, inspiredwordcafe.com. What I want to do now is I'm going to pull up our poets who read from the anthology today. I'm just going to spotlight a few additional videos here. If you'll give me a moment. And we're just going to very briefly chat here. Oh, it won't let me add any more pins. Oh, sorry, no, that's because Penn, would you be able to reactivate your camera? And then we can have you join us virtually here. Just a moment. Sorry, folks. Oh, there we are.
Did you find Penn? She may have faded out. It is after 11 in Ontario.
Oh, I'm sorry for keeping you up so late, but we appreciate you being here, all of you. I'm just going to send an unmute request. So we're just going to have a little bit of a chat here, and I was just going to go around and ask the same question to everyone about the poem that you read tonight. And I was wondering if you would just be able to describe what it was like getting to not just see your poem in this order that we've seen here, which I feel like gives so much more meaning, as Daniel and I were talking about earlier, to the feeling that the reader pulls away, but also now hearing that poem with these others in the order we had tonight. I was wondering if you could talk about how that journey has come from writing those poems, which we got to hear a little bit about earlier, to seeing them in this context here. Pen, in the interest of not keeping up too much later, because I know how much later it is over there, I was wondering if you could go first. You started off with that really beautiful start to the evening, and I think it's only right that we start off with you again.
Well, those two poems are part of a long sequence that is a performance piece, really. I haven't published them. I just haven't had the courage to publish them. So to have Daniel isolate them so appropriately in the different sections gave me a lot more courage to go forward with the whole sequence. So I was grateful for that. And they've been brewing for a long time. And I laughed when I read the line, "Grief is no time for emotion." It's like Wordsworth said, poems are reflected in tranquility. And what you said about catharsis, I think that hearing pieces from all of you, Linda's and Nelson and all of them, and knowing your stories a little bit now, I found that it was part of being held in a larger arms.
Thank you. Yeah, I really think I do feel that. And that line, I think I had to stifle a bit of a laugh the first time I read it too. I was like, grief is no time for emotion is kind of how it feels, right? I love how apt that is, and how joyful it can be.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Pen. Sally, you read next, and I was wondering if you could also talk a little bit about that journey and how it felt having that in context, and how that has contributed to the continuing journey of this poem.
When I received the book, one of the first things I was struck by was the sheer number of poems that were in there. And I have an even deeper appreciation now for Mr. Scott and all of the work it must have gone into the sorting and placing and polishing of all of those poems from so many different people. When I wrote the poem, I had just left an abusive relationship and I was terrified of starting over. But the writing of the poem itself was in its own way healing. And because it was that for me, when I saw the call for submissions for Daniel's book, I wanted to be able to share that words can make such a difference and they need to be shared. That's all.
Thank you. And I think you're absolutely right about the power of words, having a conversation like this present. I think that couldn't put it better myself. So thank you so much, Sally. All right, up next, Linda, I'm going to ask you the same question about the journey of your piece here and the way that you feel that may have been continuing in the context of not just the anthology, but also hearing it aloud with the voices of these other wonderful poets.
Yeah, it's well, it's an honor to be among these other poets. It's such an important subject. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I too was struck by the size of the book when it arrived. The number of poems that are in there, and I'm sure you had lots that came in that you didn't even include. And I was the one I think Daniel was referring to when he said that we'd had this conversation, and I'd said I'd thought of a whole bunch of other suicide-related poems I had. You know, one that comes to mind is one of a friend who tried and fortunately didn't succeed, and I wrote him one sort of a stiff upper lip kind of thing that I wrote for him, and yeah, it's just sort of an ongoing conversation, and I think it's so important that we have these conversations.
Thank you so much, Linda. I think you're absolutely right, and that's a really just nice way of putting it. So thank you. Last but certainly not least, Heidi, I'm going to pose the same question to you, just about the journey of this poem in the context of this anthology.
Well, I have to credit Daniel. This was an incredible amount of work that he put into this anthology. And I was like everyone else, I was amazed at how big a book it is and how important a book it is as well. The poem that I wrote took me years to write, actually. It's something, that I have found very difficult because the death of a child in this manner is a really true tragedy. And somehow the only way I was able to access the material was by using these mystical elements that I included in my poem, and that hopefully gave some sense of light to it, because it's such a dark subject, really. And such an important, as Linda said, such an important subject that we need to speak more openly about. I can't tell you how many families I know locally who have had children commit suicide. One family that I know who have been great advocates in this community had 2 sons commit suicide. So, it's just wonderful that this book is here and it can be used as a reference to enter that material. So thank you, Daniel.
And I just want to say a huge thanks to you as well, Heidi, and Daniel, of course, and everyone who read tonight, including our open mic poets, Travis and Valerie. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a real privilege here to have all of these wonderful voices and addressing the issue of suicide and self-harm, which, as I think we've heard a lot tonight, is something that is better talked about than not. So a huge thank you to all of you. Just before we wrap up for the evening, I've just got a little bit of housekeeping here. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to, because I know some people weren't here right at the beginning, I'm going to upload to the chat here a document that those who were not here right at the beginning might have missed, which is a set of crisis lines and websites that you can access if you have been affected or someone you know has been affected by the issues brought up in tonight's event. Please don't hesitate to reach out to one of those lines. Those are specific for BC. We made it before we realized this would be open to so many people from all over the country. But there are, of course, similar services available pretty much everywhere in the world. So do not hesitate to Google your local crisis line. And just a reminder, something whenever this issue comes up, I like to bring up is that for those who aren't always comfortable talking on the phone or speaking voice to voice with someone about these issues, there are text channels that you can text or use an anonymous web chat to access. So I always like to remind folks that those exist because sometimes voicing suicide doesn't always happen with our voices and can be a barrier, but there are indeed those options. Now, we do typically end our public reading series events at IWC on a cheery note to let out some of the heaviness of an evening. But in this case, we have, I think we've dealt with a particularly heavy topic. That said, I think we've also managed to bring out a lightness in the beauty and wonder of these poems that has, for me personally, just had such an impact. So thank you again, Daniel. But instead of our traditional silly question that we end with, usually we'll ask something along the lines of, if you could be fruit or vegetable or something like that. But I thought we'd, I can see Daniel laughing. I thought we'd end with something that is inspiring you, which is a little lighthearted, but I think also goes well with the inspiration I have personally felt from hearing all of you speak tonight. And I was wondering if we could just go through our panel here again, just ask if there's something you're reading right now that happens to be inspiring you. Daniel, I'll put you on the spot first.
Yeah, I'm currently rereading the memoir of Boris Pasternak's mistress, who was the model for Lara in Dr. Zhivago, and the book is called Captive of Time. It's not light reading, but it's a fascinating exploration of Russian art and literature during the Stalinist era. Obviously I'm not a light reader.
Well, wonderful. And thank you for sharing. And you know what? I will throw in a little bit of a lighthearted question here because I just had someone message me directly and ask if we could go for the, so if no one minds, should we go for a little lighter question here, a silly question? All right, well, only because it's been asked for, I'll throw it in. The question we had originally prepared for tonight is, if you could be a small mammal or rodent, ideally something under a meter cubed, what would it be, Daniel? And I'll start off with
a rodent.
Oh, there.
Or
a small mammal. A vole. Wonderful. I think I would be a lynx, only because they have the bow ties. Heidi, let's go to you next. What's something you're reading that's been uplifting or inspiring you lately?
Well, I've been reading Jan's Wiki, Songs for Relinquishing the Earth. It was a book that was originally came out as a handmade book, individually sewn for each person. And now it's available in print. It's an absolutely gorgeous book. She's such a talented poet. And if I were to be a rodent, I think I'd be a hedgehog. All my soft places hidden inside.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you. And over to you, Linda. What's something that you've been reading that's been uplifting or inspiring you lately?
I just recently have been reading John Gould's collection of short stories called The End of Me. It's the name of the book. And he's just such a wonderful fiction writer. How he can pack so much into like 3 or 4 pages, I just don't know, but it's wonderful to watch and to read. I'd probably be a cat.
A cat, wonderful. You know what? There are some days I want to curl up and be a cat. That seems like the perfect life sometimes.
I have on the floor right there.
Oh. Oh, perfect. How perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And Sally. what's something you've been reading that's been inspiring or uplifting you lately?
Well, I've been very inspired and uplifted by all of the creative people in the Kelowna community, and well, actually BC altogether. And so many of my friends have published books, and it's wonderful. The one that I'm really inspired by right now, though, is a book of poetry called My Nature by the current poet laureate of Tofino, Christina Lothar. It came in the mail the other day, and I'm just very, very inspired by it. And if I were to choose an animal, small animal to be, I think maybe a pine marten, because you spend a lot of time alone in the forest.
How perfect, how perfect. Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And last but certainly not least here, Pen, what have you been reading that's inspired you lately?
Well, I usually read Canadian poetry almost exclusively, but I've been reading Kay Ryan, the American poet, the best of it. And she writes very short, pithy. Maybe it's because of the distractions of the pandemic, my short attention span, but her work is fabulous. And in terms of novels, Catherine Bush's Blaze Island is phenomenal. I really recommend it. It's on the other end of the world in Outpost, Newfoundland. Excellent book. And like Roberta, I'd be a fox. I spent a year researching foxes for a book called Fox Haunts. So I have to be a fox.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Oh
That
yeah,
sounds
I'm
perfect.
reading a 1-minute poem from that book for Poets Corner, is it? The 1 minute. I'm doing that in a couple of days. So foxes.
Oh, wonderful. I just want to say a huge thanks again to everyone. And if we could just give another virtual applause here. Huge thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. It has been a real privilege. And thank you to everyone who has come in to join us virtually. All right, well, I'm not going to bother trying to take everyone's pins down because Zoom is not cooperating, so I'll just do this with everyone up there and they can all see your faces a little longer. But we are unfortunately just out of time. But I just want to say thank you again to everyone who read tonight. Thank you, Nancy, for doing our wonderful introduction. To Travis and Valerie, thank you for being our open mic poets. And Daniel, Heidi, Linda, Sally, Pen, thank you again so much for presenting here at Inspired Word Cafe. We are funded by the City of Kelowna, and this particular event in particular has been brought to you by the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies. I've had a few people thank us for making sure that this is offered free to the public, and you have the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies and all the hardworking folks at IWC and of course the City of Kelowna to thank for that. I also want to give a huge thanks out to all of our wonderful volunteers. This is, as many of you know, an almost exclusively volunteer-run passion project here. So a huge thanks to the Inspired Word Cafe Collective and everyone who makes all of our events possible. We just literally could not put on stuff like this or our podcasts or any of our offerings without you. Also want to give a huge shout out to Aaron Scott and Cole Nash, who just had a baby, and Aaron Scott is our executive director, and Cole Nash, her partner, is our acting executive director, as she is now on mat leave. And that is why you're stuck with me hosting. Normally, I just host the podcast and run tech behind these events. But we have me instead of that because there is a new Cole Mash in the world, or a new Scott Mash, sorry. Goodness, you can tell it's getting late here too. We have an open mic coming up on February 4th at 7 p.m. You can go to inspiredwordcafe.com for that. All of that information there is going to be available, and you can just go to the open mic slot to be able to join us there. And a reminder again to everyone that Daniel Scott and I will be having a longer discussion with Em McMillan and me on the Inspired Word Cafe podcast. So if you want to catch that, subscribe to our podcast at inspiredwordcafe.com. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find that over on our website. And again, of course, you can pick up the anthology that we've been hearing from tonight, Voicing Suicide. We recommend, of course, that you go to your local indie bookseller and ask them to look it up. They will be able to order it. It's from Accessus Editions. They'll be able to pull that up, no problem. And if you're ordering it online, we encourage you to use, of course, a place like bookshop.org or any local independent options that we're very, very partial towards. And please, as always, the way we end all of our Inspired Word Cafe events, we like to say, be gentle with yourself so that you can be gentle with somebody else. Thank you all and have a great night.
Good night.